So I'm here with military intelligence expert Tom Quiggin, who has some on-the-ground military experience when you were in Yugoslavia, and we're going to talk about the downing of Flight 752 from Iran, because there's new evidence showing that 2 missiles were fired at the flight, and I think we agree that 2 missiles from a complicated system is not accidental.
The first one, you could tell many different stories. The second one, there's a human element involved where somebody let that happen or caused it to happen.
Yeah, so so the system in question is an SA-15.
Yes.
And this is also, the Russians would call it a Tor B-1. So it's essentially the same thing. And so you understand how these work better than I do. We have video evidence that they're fired about 30 seconds apart, and it's over over Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. Now, the excuse the Iranians could make is there was no, we did it by accident, is that we set it to automatic. It was just automatically set to fire. And to the layman, I'm thinking, do you have a SAM system, a surface-to-air missile system, set to automatic right over your capital city, and then you don't ground civilian aircraft?
That's the first question that comes up is, given everything that was going on, which is to say the missile strikes the Iranians launched at the Americans the night before, what are you even doing with your major civilian airport open when it is right on the flight path of many different possibilities of things going wrong? The other thing that's worth remembering, that the SA-15, or as NATO calls it, the Gauntlet, as folks will know it that way as well, is not a simple system. So initially it was thought that it was maybe just some guy who had a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile like an SAN-7 or SAN-9 like that. So some independent operator panicked or did something stupid or just chose to make a shot by himself. And that was kind of the initial excuse that was possibly offered. But no, it would appear that the initial break in determining what happened probably came from ELINT, in other words, electronic intelligence. So each of the major strategic missile systems, which the SA-15 is, this is a strategic, wide-ranging, very powerful missile system. It's not a tactical system like the shoulder-fired missile. So it has probably at least 3 different kinds of radars. It has a command and control vehicle, and then it has these heavy track vehicles that actually hold the radars and actually fire the missiles. So this is a complex system with a commander and a bunch of people working on it. So that's the first thing. It wasn't just some guy tripped over something or pushed the wrong button or something like that.
And if you were to set this to automatic, it's not like there's a switch you just flip right there and all of a sudden it's on automatic. Who knows?
Yeah, so there's another thing, well maybe it was just the guys were out for a coffee, they left it on automatic kind of a thing, which would be incredibly hard to believe that any missile battery commander would do that, knowing full well he's next to a major city and he's in the flight path of an airport.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, Clausewitz has something called the fog of war, where things sometimes happen. I've had it happen when we've worked with radar in the wonderful world of Sea King helicopter, where things haven't been quite what you think they are, even though the radar shows one thing. And same thing with sonar. We did a lot of sonar work, and sometimes stuff shows up where there's really nothing there, or vice versa. So there's always the fog of war factor. But it has to be remembered, this isn't something that just happens. So first off, there is a search radar. There'll be a search radar that just looks at the sky. And it looks for anything to see what's moving. And it'll, the radar in effect will come up and say, hey, there's something moving there and I'm not quite sure what it is. So then there'll be what's called an acquisition radar. That radar will be told, which is a different radar. It'll be a higher bandwidth or a higher band radar. And it'll be told, hey, there's a contact over there. Take a long, hard look at it and see what it's doing. So it'll focus just on that and ignore everything else in the sky and say, okay, this target is moving this fast in this direction and it's climbing or descending or whatever. And then a decision gets made, okay, we're going to take a shot at that thing. So it actually goes to a fire control radar that actually guides the missile towards the target. And that's typically how the larger SA systems work. So there would have been a sequence of events which would have been monitored by humans with red lights coming on and alarms going off going, this system is about to fire a missile. So it's not like the missile went bang and everybody dropped their coffee and went, wow, what was that?
And then in their confusion, they slipped and fired another missile 30 seconds later.
The fact that they fired a second one means there's a human element involved. That everybody in that missile battery's heartbeat would have gone from 60 to 130 when the missile fires, because that's just like a huge event. So the whole kind of thing, well, it was just left on automatic and, things happen. Somebody did something. It's like, I'm not buying it. It's too complex a system.
It's too complex a system. It would imply that there is not only extreme negligence, but you'd have to say the whole missile command and all the Iranian Air Force, Counter Force has a fundamental misunderstanding of the basic fundamentals of their own system. To leave it on automatic over a civilian aircraft site while it's still monitored. And the only defense then for the Iranians is, well, we're using the airplanes as human shields against a potential American counterattack. Which is not a great...
That will become, if there is an actual investigation into this to which the Iranians actually cooperate, which I'll be surprised, but we'll see. That would have to be one of the questions is, what were you thinking about allowing civilian airliners to fly in and out of your capital city several hours after you took a shot at the Americans? What were you guys thinking? Who made these decisions? Does the Revolutionary Guard talk to the military? Does the military talk to the civilians? That's a big problem in Iran because people are so terrified of the Revolutionary Guard they won't talk to them a lot of times. They're afraid to question them. So that's kind of an issue. The other thing that goes behind all of this is to watch the initial Iranian reactions and then kind of put them on a sort of like a timeline and follow them along. And you can see they just told multiple lies, and as each lie was taken apart, they moved to the next lie. Which, you know, if there's been a screw up, your best bet is always to come out and say, yeah, we screwed that one. Our bad, you know. But in this case, the initial thing was, oh, we believe it was an engine failure. And it's like, that went out the window with the first video that came out, the handheld, it was probably a cell phone or whatever. The guy took a video. And as you watch the aircraft, you can see the fireball growing, and then the airplane fades to the right, and then it crashes, and you hear the guy saying, you know, oh my God, we better call the firefighters. Here's the issue with it's a mechanical failure story. As soon as I saw that video, it's wrong. So it's a twin-engine jet, got an engine on each wing. The engines are well below the wing. Even if there was a catastrophic internal failure of the high bypass turbofan, which is what that is, it's a high bypass turbofan engine, even if the power turbine had just shredded itself, which happens on rare occasions, it would have shredded the engine, it may have punched a few holes in the fuselage, and it might eventually start a fire, even though the fans are towards, those fans are to the back of the engine. It may have eventually started a fire, but even in that, the fire would be below the wing. So it wouldn't compromise the integrity of the wing really quickly, which is one reason the engines are put down like that, is to keep them out of the wing itself. So the idea that somehow the thing had a catastrophic engine failure, the pilot didn't call, they didn't push an electronic distress button, nothing, and then they just kind of sat on the airplane while it went in. It's like, well, no, that makes no sense. Because a massive engine failure doesn't cause a comms failure. So then the second story we got was, well, you know, it was the fault of the airliner because the guy turned sharply towards a sensitive area, and that scared us. And if you looked at it and said, well, if that was true, that's right. If you fly towards a sensitive area, if you try and fly over the White House right now, you get bounced by a couple of F-15s very quickly. So that's understandable. But then you look at it and go, no, no, the plane didn't turn towards a sensitive area. The plane was hit, on the most likely on the right-hand side, and the aircraft started to fail and was going into a spiral down towards the right. So the story that, oh, it went towards a sensitive area is like, no, no, it was hit. And then it went that direction. So again, sorry guys, I'm not buying your story. And then there was kind of another story, well, that was like one guy did it. You know, just some crazy guy did it, whatever. And if it had been a handheld SA-7 or an SA-9 or the American equivalent like a Stinger or something like that, then you'd go, yeah, one idiot by himself
can fire those.
With an aircraft that low to the ground, which is heat-seeking, et cetera, and against the Ukrainian airliners, which most likely have no air defense system on them. Some airliners do, most don't. That one didn't. So you might buy the single idiot story, but it wasn't. It was an SA-15. So as the lies keep unraveling, they keep coming up with new stories, which to me sort of, having testified in court, having taught judges and special advocate lawyers how intelligence works, how evidence works, and how that all blends together in court. If I was, you know, tomorrow you had to go into court on this one, I'd say, well, Your Honor, here's the Iranian story. Lie, 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 lie. Ergo, don't believe any of it.
I think that's safe to say, yeah. So thank you so much for coming in and explaining to us why shooting missiles at planes probably is a bit more complicated than some drunk guy holding a missile launcher. So, thank you so much. And Iran, I'm calling it, you did it. Bad Iran.